Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mask Falls. Vincent Morrison had always been a man who observed more than he spoke. In the sterile conference room of Hartwell and Associates, he sat across from his wife Diana and her lawyer, his weathered hands folded calmly on the mahogany table. 23 years of marriage were about to be dissolved into legal documents and asset divisions. Diana couldn't stop glancing at her phone. Vincent noticed, he always noticed, the subtle flush in her cheeks when a text arrived, the way she bit her lower lip while typing responses. For the past 8 months, since he'd discovered her affair with Troy Hoffman, Vincent had become a student of his wife's deceptions. The house on Maple Street will go to Mrs. Morrison, Diana's attorney was saying, along with 50% of all marital assets, as per California law. Vincent's lawyer, a sharp woman named Carol Brennan, nodded. My client agrees to all terms. Diana looked surprised. Throughout their marriage, Vincent had fought her on every major purchase, every vacation, every expenditure. His sudden compliance should have been a red flag, but Diana was too intoxicated by her anticipated freedom to question it. What Diana didn't know was that Vincent Morrison was far more than the mid-level insurance adjuster she'd married. 25 years ago, fresh out of Stanford Business School, he'd started a consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Solutions. The company specialized in corporate restructuring and hostile takeovers, operating so discreetly that even Diana had no idea it existed. While she thought he earned $65,000 a year investigating insurance claims, Vincent's real income was closer to $2.3 million annually. The house, the cars, the modest bank accounts Diana was splitting, they were breadcrumbs compared to Vincent's actual wealth. Hidden in a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts was an empire built on his ability to dismantle businesses and destroy careers with surgical precision. As the lawyers finalized paperwork, Vincent studied his wife's face. Diana Morrison had once been Diana Fletcher, a small-town girl from Nebraska who'd moved to Los Angeles with dreams of acting. She'd waitressed at an upscale restaurant in Beverly Hills when Vincent met her, serving him coffee while he reviewed acquisition targets. Her beauty was undeniable, auburn hair that caught the light, green eyes that sparkled with ambition, and a smile that could disarm the most skeptical businessman. But beauty fades, and underneath, Diana had revealed herself to be selfish, materialistic, and ultimately unfaithful. The worst part wasn't even the affair itself. It was that she'd chosen Troy Hoffman, Vincent's former business partner. Troy Hoffman had been Vincent's roommate at Stanford, his best man at the wedding, and godfather to their daughter Emma. When Vincent had started Meridian, Troy was supposed to be his co-founder. Instead, Troy had stolen Vincent's initial business plan, started his own competing firm, and poached 3 of Vincent's early clients. That betrayal had cost Vincent nearly $1 million and forced him to rebuild from scratch. Now, 15 years later, Troy was sleeping with Vincent's wife, believing he'd finally gotten the better of his old friend. Neither Troy nor Diana realized they were about to become test subjects in Vincent's most sophisticated psychological warfare campaign. The divorce will be finalized in 60 days, Carol announced, closing her briefcase. Congratulations on keeping this civil, everyone. As they stood to leave, Diana's phone buzzed again. This time she didn't hide her smile. Special plans tonight? Vincent asked casually. Diana's cheeks flushed. Just drinks with some girlfriends. Vincent nodded. He knew she was meeting Troy at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. He knew because he'd been monitoring their communications for months, building a comprehensive file on their relationship. Every text message, every phone call, every hotel reservation was documented in a database that would make the NSA jealous. Have fun, Vincent said, meaning it. After tonight, Diana would never have fun again. Chapter 2. The Architect of Ruin. 3 weeks later, Vincent sat in his real office, a corner suite on the 42nd floor of a downtown skyscraper with panoramic views of the Pacific. His assistant, Patricia Reeves, briefed him on the day's agenda while he reviewed financial reports from his network of subsidiary companies. The Hoffman situation is proceeding on schedule, Patricia reported. She was a former CIA analyst who joined Meridian 5 years earlier, bringing with her an expertise in corporate espionage that had proven invaluable. His company's quarterly projections are off by 12%, and 3 major clients have expressed concerns about service quality. Vincent smiled. Troy's firm, Hoffman Strategic Group, was bleeding money because Vincent had been systematically undermining it for the past 6 months. Anonymous tips to regulatory agencies had triggered expensive audits. Key employees had been recruited away with better offers from Vincent's shell companies. Client relationships had been poisoned through carefully orchestrated rumors about Troy's professional reliability. What about Diana's employment situation? Hartwell Marketing is experiencing unusual pressure from several directions, Patricia replied, consulting her tablet. Their biggest client is threatening to pull a $2.8 million contract due to performance concerns with the account team. 3 other clients have submitted formal complaints about campaign quality. The CEO is planning significant staff reductions. Diana worked as a senior marketing manager at Hartwell, a mid-sized advertising agency that specialized in luxury brands. She'd been there for 8 years and considered her position secure. What she didn't realize was that Vincent controlled the investment firm that had provided Hartwell's expansion capital 2 years earlier. Through a series of holding companies and intermediaries, he effectively owned 35% of her employer. The beautiful irony was that Diana's own affair had provided Vincent with the leverage he needed. Troy had been feeding Diana inside information about competing agencies, which she'd been using to sabotage rival campaigns. Vincent had documented every instance of corporate espionage, building a case that would not only justify Diana's termination, but potentially result in criminal charges. Have we identified a replacement for her position? Vincent asked. Patricia smiled, a rare expression for the typically stoic former intelligence officer. Your daughter Emma has accepted the offer. She'll start Monday. Emma Morrison was 25 years old and brilliant. She'd graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern with degrees in marketing and psychology, then spent 3 years working for a top-tier agency in Chicago. She was also completely loyal to her father, having discovered her mother's affair months before Vincent confronted Diana about it. Emma had been the one to suggest the most psychologically devastating element of Vincent's revenge, replacing Diana with her own daughter. The symbolism would be unmistakable. Diana had thrown away her family for a shallow affair, and now her family would literally take her place. Excellent work, Vincent said. Begin Phase 3. Phase 3 was the cruelest part of the plan. For the next month, Vincent would systematically strip away every element of the life Diana thought she was entitled to. Her job, her social circle, her financial security, her relationship with Troy, all of it would crumble simultaneously, leaving her with nothing but the bitter realization that her husband had orchestrated every second of her downfall. Vincent opened his desk drawer and retrieved a single dollar bill, the same one Diana would hand him at the divorce party in 4 weeks. He'd been carrying it for years, a reminder from his early days building Meridian when every dollar mattered. Soon, it would become the symbol of Diana's complete destruction. His phone rang, interrupting his planning. The caller ID showed Emma's number. Hi, sweetheart, Vincent answered. Dad, are you sure about this? Emma's voice carried a note of concern. I know Mom hurt you, but destroying her entire life seems. Seems what? Emma paused. Ruthless. Your mother destroyed our family for meaningless sex with a man who betrayed me long before he betrayed our marriage, Vincent replied coldly. Ruthless is exactly what this situation calls for. Are you having second thoughts about helping me? No, Emma said quickly. Mom made her choice. I just wanted to make sure you'd made yours. I made my choice the day I found out about the affair, Vincent said. Everything since then has been preparation. Diana and Troy want to play games with people's lives? I'm going to teach them what happens when you play games with Vincent Morrison. After hanging up, Vincent returned to his financial reports. Tomorrow, he would visit his lawyer to finalize the trust fund he was establishing for Emma, a $50 million inheritance that would ensure his daughter never wanted for anything. Diana, meanwhile, would spend the rest of her life wondering how she'd managed to lose everything so completely. The only regret Vincent felt was that he hadn't started destroying his enemies sooner. Chapter 3. The Party. The divorce party was Diana's idea, though she'd probably claim later that her friends had insisted on it. Vincent arrived at the Beverly Hills restaurant exactly at 7, wearing a simple gray suit that made him look like the unremarkable insurance adjuster Diana believed she was leaving behind. The party was in full swing when he walked into the private dining room. Diana had invited 30 people, mostly her co-workers from Hartwell Marketing, some neighbors, and a few couples they'd socialized with during their marriage. Troy Hoffman stood beside Diana at the head of the table, his arm possessively around her waist, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Look who decided to show up," Diana announced loudly, raising her champagne glass. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Vincent. "Everyone, my soon-to-be ex-husband." A few people laughed nervously. Most seemed uncomfortable with the obvious cruelty of the situation. Vincent simply smiled and took a seat at the far end of the table. "We should thank Vincent for being such a good sport about all this," Diana continued, clearly already drunk. "Not every man would be so gracious about his wife trading up." Troy's grin widened. At 48, he was still handsome in a silver fox way, with expensive clothes and a Rolex that caught the light when he moved. He'd built his consulting firm into a respectable mid-market player, though nowhere near the level of success Diana imagined. She saw the designer suits and luxury car and assumed Troy was wealthy, not realizing that he was leveraged to his eyeballs and constantly struggling to maintain his lifestyle. "To new beginnings," Diana toasted, and the room reluctantly raised their glasses. Vincent sipped his water and waited. He'd timed everything perfectly. In approximately 10 minutes, Robert Caldwell, the CEO of Hartwell Marketing, would receive a phone call that would change the trajectory of everyone in this room. Patricia Reeves was already in position outside the restaurant, coordinating with a team of investigators who'd spent weeks documenting Diana's corporate espionage activities. The evidence was overwhelming: stolen client lists, sabotage campaigns, confidential information shared with competitors. Any one of these violations would justify immediate termination. Together, they painted a picture of systematic corporate betrayal that would likely result in criminal charges. "Vincent, you're awfully quiet," said Jennifer Walsh, one of Diana's co-workers. "Are you okay with all this?" "I'm fine," Vincent replied calmly. "Diana deserves to celebrate getting what she wants." Diana's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd expected him to be bitter, angry, defeated. His composure unsettled her. "What I want," Diana said loudly, "is to finally be with a real man. Someone who knows how to treat a woman right. Someone who isn't content to spend his whole life investigating fender benders for insurance companies." The insult hit its mark. Several people winced at Diana's cruelty. But Vincent just nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right," he said. "You deserve exactly what you're going to get." Something in his tone made Diana pause. For just a moment, she looked uncertain. Then Troy stepped forward, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "Actually, we have a little going-away present for old Vince here." He handed the envelope to Diana, who opened it with theatrical flair. Inside was a $1 bill. "Enjoy being broke," Diana shouted, holding up the bill for everyone to see. The room went dead silent. Even her most supportive friends looked horrified by the naked cruelty of the gesture. Vincent stood up slowly and walked to Diana. Without a word, he took the dollar bill from her hand, folded it carefully, and placed it in his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Patricia, it's time." He ended the call and smiled at Diana. "Thank you for the reminder." "Reminder of what?" Diana asked, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "That some people never learn to count past one." Before Diana could respond, Robert Caldwell burst through the dining room doors. The CEO of Hartwell Marketing looked frazzled, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled, and his face flushed with anger. "Diana Morrison," he barked. "What the hell are you doing here?" Diana turned pale. "Robert? What are you?" "You're fired," Caldwell interrupted. "Effective immediately. Security is already clearing out your office. Your replacement has arrived and will be taking over your accounts first thing Monday morning." "My replacement?" Diana stammered. "What are you talking about? You can't just—" "Your replacement has arrived," Caldwell repeated, stepping aside. Through the doorway walked Emma Morrison, wearing a sharp black business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She looked exactly like her mother had 20 years ago, but with an intelligence and composure that Diana had never possessed. Diana's face went ghost white. "Emma? What are you doing here?" Emma smiled, her father's smile, cold and calculating. "I'm your replacement, Mom. Starting Monday, I'll be taking over all your client accounts at Hartwell." Mr. Caldwell was very impressed with my portfolio. "But you work in Chicago," Diana whispered. "Not anymore. Dad helped me relocate." Amazing what doors open when you have the right connections. Diana spun to face Vincent, her eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. "You? How did you?" The same way I've done everything for the past 20 years, Vincent replied calmly. Very carefully, Troy stepped forward, his face red with anger. What kind of sick game is this, Morrison? Vincent turned his attention to Troy for the first time all evening. The kind of game you started when you stole my business plan 15 years ago. The kind of game you continued when you decided to sleep with my wife. Did you really think I'd forgotten what you did to me back then? That was business, Troy sputtered. This is personal. Everything is personal, Troy, and everything has consequences. Vincent looked around the room at the stunned faces of Diana's friends and co-workers. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's important to have witnesses when someone gets exactly what they deserve. He headed for the door, then paused and looked back at Diana one last time. Oh, and Diana, you might want to check your bank accounts when you get home. I believe you'll find them educational. As Vincent walked out, he could hear Diana frantically calling Troy's name behind him. But Troy was already on his phone, probably discovering that his own world was beginning to collapse. Vincent smiled as he stepped into the Los Angeles evening. The real fun was just beginning. Chapter 4, The Web Titans. Vincent didn't go home after the party. Instead, he drove to his office, where Patricia was waiting with a bottle of aged scotch and a comprehensive update on the evening's developments. Caldwell performed beautifully, Patricia reported as she poured 2 glasses. Diana tried to argue, but the evidence we presented was overwhelming. Corporate espionage, theft of confidential client information, deliberate sabotage of competing campaigns. The legal department is recommending they press criminal charges. Vincent sipped his scotch, savoring both the burn of the alcohol and the sweetness of perfect execution. What about Troy? His world is collapsing faster than Diana's. 3 major clients pulled their contracts in the past 2 hours. Apparently, someone leaked details about his firm's financial irregularities to their CFOs. The financial irregularities were Vincent's masterpiece. For months, he'd been feeding Troy false information through intermediaries, convincing him to make increasingly risky investments. Troy thought he was getting insider tips on hot tech startups. In reality, he was pouring money into shell companies that Vincent controlled, designed to implode spectacularly just when Troy needed liquid capital most. How much has he lost? Conservative estimate? About $4.2 million. His firm's operating capital is essentially gone. The bank is calling in his business loans, and his personal guarantees mean they can seize his house, cars, everything. Vincent nodded with satisfaction. Troy had always been greedy, always convinced he was smarter than everyone else. Those character flaws had made him remarkably easy to manipulate. Phase 4. Patricia consulted her tablet. Emma will be introduced to Diana's client roster Monday morning. By Wednesday, we expect at least 60% of those accounts to request assignment to Emma specifically. Diana's replacement isn't just younger and more talented. She's also offering services at below-market rates. This was another layer of Vincent's revenge. Emma wasn't just taking Diana's job. She was doing it better and cheaper, making it impossible for Diana to find comparable work elsewhere. When other agencies saw that Diana had been replaced by someone younger, more competent, and more affordable, they'd question why they should hire the older, more expensive option. Personal relationships? Margaret Chun confirmed that Diana's book club has decided to take a break from meeting. The charitable foundation where she volunteers asked her to step down from the board. Troy's wife filed for divorce 3 hours ago. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Troy's wife found out. We helped her find out. Anonymous package containing photographs, hotel receipts, and some very intimate text messages. Mrs. Hoffman was already suspicious. Apparently, Troy's been cheating for years. Our evidence just gave her the ammunition she needed for a favorable divorce settlement. Vincent felt a moment of satisfaction. Troy's wife, Linda, was a decent woman who'd never deserved her husband's betrayals. At least she would emerge from this disaster with her dignity and financial security intact. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom called me 6 times. Didn't answer. She's panicking. Vincent showed the message to Patricia, who smiled. Phase 5. Tomorrow. Let Diana spend tonight wondering how much of her life I actually control. By morning, she'll be ready to do anything to stop the bleeding. Phase 5 was psychological warfare in its purest form. Vincent had deliberately left Diana with just enough hope to make her desperate. She still had the house, still had some savings, still believed she could rebuild her life with Troy. Tomorrow, Vincent would systematically destroy each of those remaining pillars, leaving Diana with nothing but the dawning realization that her husband was not the mild-mannered insurance adjuster she'd underestimated for 23 years. What about Emma? How is she handling this? Patricia's expression softened slightly. She's tougher than I expected, angry at her mother, proud of her father, but also concerned about how far you're willing to take this. How far am I willing to take this? That's what she's afraid to ask. Vincent set down his scotch glass and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Diana was probably crying herself to sleep, still not understanding the magnitude of what was happening to her. Troy was likely pacing his office, frantically calling clients and creditors, trying to hold together a business that was already dead. I built an empire while Diana thought I was investigating car accidents, Vincent said quietly. I've spent months orchestrating the complete destruction of two people who betrayed me in the most fundamental ways possible. Emma wants to know how far I'm willing to take this. He turned back to Patricia, his expression cold and resolute. There is no far enough. There's only justice, and Diana and Troy haven't begun to pay for what they've done. Chapter 5. The Unraveling. Diana's world collapsed piece by piece over the next 72 hours. Each disaster precisely timed for maximum psychological impact. Monday morning, she woke up to find her credit cards frozen. When she called the bank, a polite customer service representative explained that unusual activity on her accounts had triggered security protocols. The unusual activity was Vincent systematically draining their joint accounts and transferring the funds to secure investments in Emma's name. Perfectly legal moves that nevertheless left Diana temporarily unable to access her own money. By noon, she discovered that Troy wasn't answering his phone. When she drove to his office, she found a bankruptcy notice taped to the front door and a for lease sign in the window. Hoffman Strategic Group had ceased operations overnight, leaving behind only debts and angry creditors. Tuesday brought news that the mortgage company was accelerating the payment schedule on the house Diana thought she owned free and clear. Vincent had apparently taken out a substantial home equity loan 18 months earlier, something Diana vaguely remembered signing papers for, but hadn't paid attention to at the time. The loan was now in default, and foreclosure proceedings would begin within 30 days. But the cruelest blow came Wednesday afternoon, when Diana finally tracked down Troy at a bar in Santa Monica, drinking alone and looking like he'd aged 10 years in a week. They took everything, Troy said without looking up from his whiskey. The house, the cars, the boat. Even my fucking golf clubs. 20 years of building that business, gone. Diana sat beside him, her own world spinning out of control. How is this possible? How could Vincent do this to us? Troy laughed bitterly. Your mild-mannered insurance adjuster husband? Diana, your husband isn't who you think he is. What do you mean? I spent the last 3 days trying to figure out how he destroyed my business so completely. You know what I found? Shell companies, holding companies, offshore accounts, investment firms I've never heard of, but somehow all trace back to Vincent Morrison. Your husband didn't just orchestrate our destruction. He's been playing chess while we were playing checkers. Diana felt something cold settle in her stomach. That's impossible. Vincent makes $60,000 a year investigating insurance claims. No, Diana. Vincent Morrison owns companies that eat businesses like mine for breakfast. Remember that consulting firm I started after college? The one that made me successful enough to steal you away from your boring husband. Diana nodded weakly. I stole the business plan from Vincent. I thought I was so fucking clever, taking his ideas and making them my own. But now I'm realizing he let me steal them. He's been watching me for 15 years, waiting for the right moment to destroy me completely. The revelation hit Diana like a physical blow. If Troy was right, then Vincent had been planning this revenge for years before she'd even met her lover. Her affair hadn't triggered his vengeance. It had simply provided him with the perfect opportunity to execute it. So what do we do? Diana whispered. Troy drained his whiskey and signaled for another. We? There is no we, Diana. My wife divorced me, took half of what little I have left. My business is dead. My reputation is destroyed. I can't even afford this apartment much longer. But what about us? What about our relationship? Troy looked at her with something approaching pity. Our relationship was built on the fantasy that you were leaving a loser for a winner. Turns out, you were leaving a winner for a loser. How long do you think that's going to sustain us? Diana realized with growing horror that Troy was right. She'd been attracted to his success, his confidence, his apparent wealth. Without those things, he was just a broken middle-aged man drowning his sorrows in cheap whiskey. You're giving up? I'm being realistic. Vincent Morrison played us both perfectly. The smart move now is to minimize additional damage. Diana's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoying your new life? V. She showed Troy the message. He read it and laughed again, the sound hollow and defeated. He's not done with us, Troy said. This is just the beginning. Diana left the bar feeling more alone than she'd ever been in her life. 24 hours ago, she'd thought she was starting fresh with a successful man who loved her. Now she realized she'd been a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. When she got home, to the house she might lose within a month, she found a manila envelope on her doorstep. Inside were photographs, Diana and Troy at various hotels, intimate moments captured with telephoto lenses, along with copies of every text message they'd exchanged over the past 8 months. A note was attached. Tomorrow's board meeting at the charitable foundation should be interesting. They don't typically approve of volunteers who engage in corporate espionage and adultery. V. Diana sank onto her couch and finally allowed herself to cry. Vincent wasn't just destroying her present. He was systematically erasing her future, ensuring that she'd never be able to rebuild what she'd lost. The worst part was the growing realization that she deserved every bit of it. Chapter 6. The Prodigy's Game. Emma Morrison had inherited her father's strategic mind, but possessed a ruthlessness that sometimes surprised even Vincent. On her third day at Hartwell Marketing, she'd already consolidated Diana's former client roster and identified opportunities for expansion that her mother had missed entirely. She was working late in Diana's former office, now redecorated with modern furniture and abstract art that erased any trace of the previous occupant, when her phone rang. "How are you adjusting to the new position?" Vincent asked. "It's easier than I expected. Mom's clients actually seem relieved to be working with someone who returns phone calls and meets deadlines." "She wasn't performing well?" Emma hesitated. "Dad, she was coasting. Probably for years. Using her relationships to maintain accounts, but not actually doing the work to grow them. I've already identified 3 campaigns that should have generated twice the revenue they did." Vincent felt a familiar mix of pride and disappointment. Pride in Emma's competence, disappointment in Diana's mediocrity. 23 years of marriage, and he'd never realized how thoroughly his wife had checked out of her professional responsibilities. "Any problems with the transition?" "Actually, yes. I need to talk to you about something." Vincent heard something in Emma's voice that concerned him. "What is it?" "I had lunch with Mom yesterday." Vincent's blood went cold. "Emma, we discussed this." "You cannot." "Let me finish. She asked me to meet her, and I thought it might be useful to see how she's handling everything." "Dad, she's falling apart. Completely." "Good. Is it good?" "Because she spent an hour crying in a restaurant, begging me to help her understand what you're doing to her. She knows about your real business now. She knows you've been planning this for years." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That she destroyed our family for a man who betrayed you years before I was even born. That she chose her own pleasure over her daughter's welfare. That actions have consequences. And she asked me if I thought you were going to kill her." Vincent stopped breathing. "She asked you what?" "She's terrified, Dad. Not just of losing her money or her job or her house. She's genuinely afraid that you're going to have her physically harmed. The way you've systematically destroyed every aspect of her life. She thinks murder might be the logical next step." Vincent set down his phone and walked to his office window. He'd been so focused on the mechanics of revenge that he hadn't considered how it might appear to the target. To Diana, who'd never suspected the extent of his capabilities, his methodical destruction of her life might indeed seem like the prelude to physical violence. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here." "What did you tell her?" "That you weren't a killer. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure that's true anymore." Vincent felt something twist in his chest. His daughter, his brilliant, loyal daughter, was beginning to fear him. The realization was more painful than anything Diana or Troy had done. "Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have never considered physical violence against your mother or Troy. My revenge is financial and social, not physical. Do you understand? I want to believe that. It's not about belief. It's about fact. I'm destroying their lives, not ending them." There's a significant difference. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Mom also asked me something else. What? She wanted to know if there was anything she could do to make this stop. If there was any way to earn your forgiveness. Vincent almost laughed. After everything Diana had done, she still believed forgiveness was possible, that there was some magical combination of words or actions that could undo her betrayal. What did you tell her? That some things can't be forgiven. That some mistakes don't have solutions. You told her the truth. I told her what I thought you'd want me to say. But Dad, is that really how you feel? Is there nothing she could do? Vincent considered the question seriously. In the past 8 months, since discovering Diana's affair, he'd occasionally wondered if he might be overreacting. If a man who truly loved his wife would find a way to forgive and rebuild rather than destroy and abandon. But then he'd remember coming home early from a business trip and finding Troy's car in his driveway. He'd remember the sound of laughter from his bedroom, the clothes scattered in his hallway, the casual way Diana had lied to his face for months afterward. Most of all, he'd remember the conversation he'd overheard between Diana and Troy at a restaurant 3 weeks before filing for divorce. Diana had been complaining about Vincent's lack of ambition, calling him a small-town loser who'd never give her the life she deserved. Troy had agreed, adding that Diana was too good for a man who was content to stay in the minor leagues his entire career. They'd talked about Vincent like he was an obstacle to be overcome, a problem to be solved. Not a husband to be respected or a father to be honored, but an inconvenience standing between Diana and her imagined happiness. There's nothing she could do, Vincent said finally. Some betrayals are permanent. Even if she left Troy, even if she begged, especially then. Begging is what people do when they face consequences, not when they feel genuine remorse. If Diana wanted forgiveness, she should have thought about that before she decided I was too small for her dreams. Emma sighed. Okay, I needed to ask. Are you having second thoughts about helping me? No. I just want to make sure you're not having second thoughts about being my father. The comment hit Vincent like a physical blow. In his focus on destroying Diana and Troy, had he risked losing the only family member who'd remained loyal to him? Emma, you are the most important person in my life. Nothing, not revenge, not business, not anything, will ever change that. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when this is over, you'll still be the father I grew up with. Not just the man who destroyed my mother. Vincent stared out at the city lights, considering his daughter's request. The truth was that he'd already changed in ways that probably couldn't be reversed. The methodical cruelty he'd employed against Diana and Troy had awakened something in him that might be difficult to put back to sleep. But Emma didn't need to know that. I promise, he said, hoping it was a promise he could keep. Chapter 7. The Confession. Vincent hadn't expected Diana to show up at his office. His security system had alerted him when she entered the building, and he'd watched on the surveillance monitor as she pleaded with the front desk staff to let her see him. She looked terrible, gaunt, exhausted, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and desperate. Against his better judgment, he told security to let her up. Diana entered his real office for the first time in their 23-year marriage, her eyes wide as she took in the panoramic city views, the expensive furniture, the obvious markers of serious wealth. This is who you really are, she said quietly, not quite a question. This is who I've always been. You just never bothered to look beyond your own assumptions. Diana walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city below. How long have you owned all this? I started building Meridian 25 years ago. The company's been profitable for 22 years. While I thought you were investigating car accidents, you thought what you wanted to think. I never lied to you about what I did for a living. I told you I worked in risk assessment and corporate consulting. You assumed that meant insurance claims because it fit your narrative about being married to an underachiever. Diana turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I was ordinary. Turns out, you're exactly who I suspected you were. Diana sank into one of the leather chairs across from Vincent's desk. So this was all a test? Our entire marriage? No. Our marriage was real until you decided it wasn't worth preserving. This, Vincent gestured around the office, was my insurance policy. I've spent 25 years building something that nobody could take away from me. Not even my wife. And Troy. Troy has been a target since the day he stole my business plan at Stanford. Your affair just gave me the excuse I'd been waiting for to destroy him completely. Diana was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of her misjudgment. What happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. Vincent, please. I know I made a mistake. You made a choice, Vincent interrupted coldly. Every text message, every hotel room, every lie you told me was a deliberate choice. Don't insult my intelligence by calling it a mistake. Diana leaned forward desperately. What if I ended things with Troy? What if I agreed to marriage counseling? What if I did whatever you wanted me to do? Vincent studied his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, with the same analytical detachment he applied to failing businesses. Do you love him? The question caught Diana off guard. What? Troy, do you love him? Diana hesitated just long enough to reveal the truth. It's complicated. No, it's not. You either love him or you don't. Which is it? I thought I did. But now that everything's falling apart. Vincent nodded. You love the idea of him. The successful businessman, the excitement of an affair, the fantasy of a different life. But when the fantasy collapsed, so did your feelings. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Vincent's voice remained calm, but Diana flinched at the ice in his tone. Fair would have been honoring the vows you made 23 years ago. Fair would have been talking to your husband about your dissatisfaction instead of fucking his former business partner. Fair would have been considering how your choices might affect your daughter. Emma hates me now. Emma sees you clearly now. There's a difference. Diana broke down completely, sobbing with the abandoned desperation of someone who'd finally realized the magnitude of her losses. Please, Vincent, I'll do anything. I'll sign a post-nuptial agreement giving you everything. I'll never see Troy again. I'll go to therapy. I'll change. I'll become the wife you deserve. Just please stop destroying my life. Vincent watched his wife's collapse with clinical interest. 6 months ago, seeing Diana cry would have moved him to comfort her. Now, her tears seemed like just another manipulation attempt, another performance designed to get what she wanted. Diana, answer me honestly. If I forgave you, if we rebuilt our marriage, if everything went back to the way it was, how long do you think it would be before you found another Troy? Never. I swear to you, never. How can you swear to something when you don't even understand why you did it the first time? Diana looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? You still think this was about sex? About excitement or romance or feeling unappreciated? You don't understand that this was about character, about who you are at your core. Then tell me. Help me understand. Vincent leaned back in his chair, considering whether Diana was even capable of understanding her own psychology. You cheated because you believed you deserved better than what you had. You chose Troy because he represented a lifestyle upgrade. You lied to me for months because you were convinced your happiness mattered more than my dignity or Emma's family stability. You're saying I'm a bad person. I'm saying you're a selfish person. And selfish people don't change because they face consequences. They just get better at hiding their selfishness. Diana stared at him with growing horror. So there's nothing I can do? No way to earn your forgiveness. Some sins don't have absolution, even if I spend the rest of my life making up for what I did. Vincent considered the question seriously. Could Diana change? Could she become someone worthy of forgiveness? Theoretically, perhaps. But forgiveness would require Vincent to trust her again, to be vulnerable to someone who'd already proven herself capable of profound betrayal. It would require rebuilding love from the ashes of complete destruction. More importantly, it would require forgetting the conversation he'd overheard at that restaurant, where Diana had called him a small-town loser who'd never amount to anything. Even then, Vincent said finally. Diana nodded slowly, seeming to age years in that moment. You're going to take everything, aren't you? My job, my house, my friends, my future. I'm going to take everything you stole from me. My trust, my dignity, my family, my peace of mind. It seems like a fair trade. And Emma? Emma chose her loyalty. I didn't force that decision. Diana stood up slowly, recognizing that she'd been dismissed. I want you to know that I really did love you. At the beginning. I know. That's what makes this so unforgivable. After Diana left, Vincent sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. For the first time since discovering the affair, he felt something approaching regret. Not for his actions, but for the marriage he'd once believed in. Diana had been right about one thing. He had loved her at the beginning. Completely, desperately, with the kind of young love that believes it can overcome any obstacle. But love, Vincent had learned, was not enough. Character mattered more than passion. Loyalty mattered more than excitement. And trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. Tomorrow, he would finish what Diana had started when she chose another man over her family. Chapter 8. The Final Blow. The foreclosure sale was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Vincent arrived early, parking across the street from the house where he'd spent 21 years of his marriage, watching as Diana loaded boxes into a rented U-Haul truck with the help of Emma. The sight of his daughter working alongside the woman who'd betrayed their family should have bothered him, but Vincent understood the psychology at play. Emma was saying goodbye to her childhood home, not helping her mother. There was a difference. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Hoffman filed for bankruptcy protection. Court rejected the petition. Too many irregularities in his financial disclosures. Vincent smiled. The irregularities were transactions Troy had made under Vincent's guidance, investments that looked legitimate on paper but violated numerous bankruptcy laws. Troy's attempt to escape his debts would now result in criminal charges for bankruptcy fraud. A black sedan pulled up behind Vincent's car. Robert Caldwell stepped out, looking nervous and slightly confused. "Mr. Morrison? You said you had something to show me." "The auction," Vincent replied, gesturing toward the house. "I wanted you to witness Diana's final humiliation." Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I have to ask, was it really necessary to destroy her so completely? I mean, the corporate espionage was serious, but this seems excessive." "Well, yes." Vincent studied Caldwell for a moment. The CEO was a decent man, competent but not brilliant, with a conscience that occasionally complicated business decisions. Vincent respected that quality even when it annoyed him. "Robert, let me ask you something. If your wife betrayed you with your business partner, would you be satisfied with just firing her?" Caldwell considered the question. I might want to hurt them, yes. But this goes beyond justice. This is complete destruction. This is proportional response. Diana didn't just cheat on me. She attacked everything I value. My family, my dignity, my ability to trust the person closest to me. In return, I've attacked everything she values. Her career, her financial security, her social standing, her future. But she's still a human being. So was I, before she decided my feelings didn't matter." Before Caldwell could respond, the auctioneer's voice cut through the morning air. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with the property at 1247 Maple Street. This is a forced sale due to mortgage default. Bidding starts at $750,000. Vincent watched Diana's face as strangers bid on her home. She stood beside the U-Haul truck, Emma's hand on her shoulder, tears streaming down her cheeks as 20 years of memories were reduced to a commodity. The bidding was spirited. The house was in an excellent neighborhood, well-maintained despite the circumstances. Vincent had bought it when Diana was pregnant with Emma, imagining it would be their forever home. Going once at $850,000. Going twice, sold to bidder number 12. Vincent smiled as a young couple celebrated their successful bid. They looked happy, excited about their new beginning. At least the house would shelter another family's dreams. "Sir," Caldwell looked confused. "Aren't you going to bid?" "Why would I bid on my own house?" "Your own?" Vincent pulled a folder from his briefcase and handed it to Caldwell. Inside were incorporation documents for Morrison Family Holdings, LLC, a shell company that had purchased the defaulted mortgage from the original lender 3 weeks earlier. "Bidder number 12 was acting on my behalf," Vincent explained. "I now own Diana's house, which I'll be selling to recover the outstanding mortgage debt. Any proceeds will go into Emma's trust fund." Caldwell stared at the documents. You forced your own wife into foreclosure, then bought her house from yourself." "I forced my ex-wife to face the consequences of her poor financial decisions. The fact that I also profited from those consequences is just good business." Across the street, Diana had realized what happened. She was staring directly at Vincent, her face pale with shock and something approaching terror. Vincent rolled down his window and waved. His phone rang. Emma's number. "Dad, what did you just do?" "I bought your childhood home. It'll be in your name by next week." "That's not what I mean. Mom is having some kind of breakdown. She keeps saying you're going to take everything." Vincent looked across the street. Diana was sitting on the curb now, Emma kneeling beside her, trying to offer comfort that Diana seemed unable to accept. "I'm going to take everything." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not finished." Emma was quiet for a moment. Dad, she's already lost her job, her house, her boyfriend, her savings. What's left? Her freedom. Vincent ended the call and started his car. Phase 6 was about to begin, and it would be the most devastating yet. By tomorrow, Diana would understand that financial ruin had been just the appetizer. The main course was criminal prosecution for corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. And Vincent had evidence that would send her to prison for 5 to 10 years. Chapter 9, The Last Dollar. 6 months later, Vincent sat in a federal courthouse watching Diana's sentencing hearing. She stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd once handed him a dollar bill and told him to enjoy being broke. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Sarah Williams said, reviewing the sentencing documents, "You've been convicted of corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft of trade secrets. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 7 years in federal prison." Diana's court-appointed attorney, she could no longer afford private counsel, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, my client is a first-time offender who acted under the influence of her co-conspirator, Mr. Troy Hoffman. She's expressed genuine remorse for her actions and asks for the court's mercy." Vincent almost laughed. Even now, Diana was trying to shift responsibility to Troy, who was sitting in a federal penitentiary serving his own 12-year sentence for bankruptcy fraud and conspiracy charges. The judge looked at Diana directly. "Mrs. Morrison, you have the opportunity to address the court before sentencing. Is there anything you'd like to say?" Diana turned slightly, her eyes finding Vincent in the gallery. He sat in the front row, wearing an expensive suit and a calm expression, watching her fall just as dispassionately as he'd watched her rise. "I want to say that I'm sorry," Diana began, her voice barely audible. "I made terrible choices that hurt people I loved. I betrayed my husband's trust, damaged my daughter's respect for me, and violated the ethics of my profession." She paused, seeming to gather strength. "But I also want the court to know that I believe my punishment has been disproportionate to my crimes. My husband is a wealthy and powerful man who used his resources to orchestrate not just my professional destruction, but my complete personal ruin. I'm not asking for sympathy, but I am asking for justice that considers the full context of these charges." Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Mrs. Morrison, while the court acknowledges that your personal circumstances may have influenced the investigation that led to these charges, that doesn't diminish the severity of your crimes. Corporate espionage undermines the integrity of our business community and cannot be tolerated." She looked down at her sentencing notes. "However, considering your lack of prior criminal history and your apparent remorse, I'm prepared to show some leniency. I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation." Diana's knees buckled slightly, but she managed to remain standing. For years, Emma would be nearly 30 when Diana was released. Her daughter's entire adult life would be shaped by her mother's absence. As the bailiff led Diana away, she looked back at Vincent one final time. He pulled the same dollar bill from his pocket, the one she'd given him at the divorce party, and held it up for her to see. Then he carefully tore it in half. Outside the courthouse, Emma was waiting beside Vincent's car. At 26, she'd grown into a formidable businesswoman in her own right, running 3 successful marketing campaigns and earning recognition as one of the industry's rising stars. For years, she said without preamble, "Less than she deserves. More than she can handle." Vincent studied his daughter's face, looking for signs of the doubt or guilt that had plagued her earlier in his campaign against Diana. Instead, he saw only a cold calculation that reminded him of himself. "Are you having second thoughts? About Mom?" "No. She made her choices. But I am wondering what happens next." "Next? You've spent 2 years orchestrating the complete destruction of 2 people who betrayed you. You've proven that crossing Vincent Morrison has consequences that most people can't imagine. So what do you do now?" Vincent considered the question. For the past 24 months, his life had been consumed by the mechanics of revenge. Every decision, every business move, every social interaction had been filtered through the lens of destroying Diana and Troy. Now that the campaign was complete, he felt oddly empty. "I suppose I go back to building instead of destroying. Is that possible? After everything you've done?" Vincent wasn't sure it was. The methodical cruelty he'd employed against Diana had changed him in ways that might be permanent. He'd discovered a capacity for psychological warfare that even he hadn't known he possessed. We'll find out. Emma nodded. For what it's worth, I don't think you went too far. Mom didn't just cheat on you. She tried to replace you. She thought she could trade up from her boring husband to a successful businessman, not realizing she was actually trading down from a successful businessman to a fraud. And Troy stole from you twice. Once in college, once with Mom. Some people only learn through complete destruction. Vincent felt a surge of pride at his daughter's ruthless pragmatism. Emma understood something that Diana never had, that actions have consequences, and those consequences don't disappear because someone feels sorry afterward. As they drove away from the courthouse, Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Morrison Industries stock hit an all-time high. Forbes wants to interview you about the company's expansion strategy. Vincent showed Emma the message. Interested in being interviewed as my chief operating officer? Emma smiled, the first genuine smile Vincent had seen from her in months. I thought you'd never ask. Looking back at the courthouse one final time, Vincent felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. Diana and Troy had believed they could betray him without consequences, treat him like an obstacle to be overcome rather than a man to be respected. They'd learned differently, and Vincent Morrison, the man they'd fatally underestimated, had taught them that some lessons are permanent. The last dollar had been torn in half, just like his marriage. But unlike Diana, Vincent had built something better from the pieces. Some victories, he reflected, are worth the wait.